Coronavirus N. Type of RNA virus affecting birds and mammals, in humans as a respiratory tract infection, by 1968, is so called for the spikes that protrude from its membranes and resemble the corona of the sun. See corona. COVID as a contraction of coronavirus disease seems to have been coined for the outbreak that began in China in 2019, COVID-19. Entries linking to coronavirus. Corona, N. Assassination of Martin Luther King, Jr. Martin Luther King Jr., an African-American clergyman and civil rights leader, was fatally shot at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee, on April 4, 1968, at 6:01 p.m. Central Standard Time. He was rushed to St. Joseph's Hospital, where he died at 7:05 p. Wikipedia. Convicted, James Earl Ray. 2001, A Space Odyssey release date. April 3, 1968, United States. Twin Towers. Construction work began on the North Tower in August 1968, and construction on the South Tower was underway by January 1969, 78. In 1968, AT&T announced that it would establish the digits 911 as the emergency code throughout the United States. The code 911 was chosen because it best fit the needs of all parties involved. First, and most important, it met public requirements because it is brief, easily remembered, and can be dialed quickly. 911 Origin and History, National Emergency Number Association. Assassination of Robert F. Kennedy. On June 5, 1968, presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy was mortally wounded shortly after midnight at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. Earlier that evening, the 42-year-old junior senator from New York was declared the winner in TH. Wikipedia. Word or phrase. English Ordinal. Full reduction. Reverse Ordinal. Reverse full reduction. Saturn's rings. 179. 53. 145. 82. Ong L. 39. 21. 96. 24. Agent Donald Wrestler. 193. 76. 293. 104. I am the arm. 88. 43. 155. 56. Strength. 111. 39. 105. 42. R. 1.21 gigawatts. 111. 39. 140. 59. Hell. 37. 19. 71. 17. Gigawatt. 88. 34. 128. 47. Time Ghost. 116. 44. 127. 46. Zeitgeist. 120. 48. 123. 51. Entirety. 116. 44. 100. 46. Hurricanes. 116. 53. 154. 64. You don't have time has you don't have a body has you are not somebody, you are not anybody, you are nobody, which is everybody, no thing, the everything broke can spell ing. 1890. 729. 2079. 711. Advertisements. Occasionally, some of your
I want to start by giving what may be to many of you a new definition of the word myth. As normally used, the word myth means an idle tale, a fable, a falsehood, or an idea that's out of date, something untrue. But there is another, older and stricter use of the word myth, whereby it doesn't mean something untrue, but it means an image, in terms of which people make sense of life and of the world. Supposing, for example, you don't understand the technicalities of electricity, and somebody wants to explain them to you. He wants to explain about the flow of currents. Well, to do that, he compares electricity with water. And because you understand water, you get some idea about the behavior of electricity. Or if an astronomer wants to explain to you what he means by expanding space, he'll use the metaphor of a balloon, a black balloon with white spots on it. The white spots represent the galaxies. And then if you blow up the balloon, they all get further away from each other at the same speed as the balloon blows up. In neither case are we saying that electricity is water or that the universe is a balloon with white spots on it. We are saying it's something like it. And so in the same way, the human being has always used images to represent his deepest ideas of how the universe works and what man's place in it is. And tonight I'm going to discuss certain aspects of two of the greatest myths in the sense of the word which have influenced mankind's thinking. First of all, the myth of the universe as an artifact, as something made, as a carpenter makes tables, chairs, and houses, or as a potter makes pots, or as a sculptor makes figurines. And on the other hand, the image of the world as a drama, in which all the things in the world are not made, but acted, in the same way as a player acts parts. For these are the two great images which govern respectively the religions of the West, descending from Hebraism, that is to say, Hebraism itself, Christianity, and Islam, and on the other hand, the myth which governs those religions which have had their origin in India, most particularly Hinduism itself, and to a lesser extent Buddhism. And I want to make it perfectly plain before I go any further that in talking about these two great religious traditions, in terms of images, I'm talking about the way they express themselves at a rather popular level.
Explore
Sophisticated
more.
Christians
Larger map.
and sophisticated Hindus
London is the capital and largest city
think
of
beyond images. For example, a Christian may think of God as the Father, but a sophisticated and educated Christian does not imagine that God is a cosmic male parent with a white beard sitting on a golden throne above the stars. Nor does a Hindu imagine literally that
England
God
and the United
is
Kingdom.
the super
It
show,
stands on the
big
river.
actor. These images are what it is like, not what it is. And perhaps when I get through with discussing them, we'll be able to ask the question as to whether any of these images still make sense to us in this 20th century when we have a view of the world so powerfully shaped by Western science. Now let me begin then with a few things about the image of the world and thus the image of man as it comes to us from the Hebrew Bible. It's said in the book of Genesis that the Lord God created man out of the dust of the earth, as if he had made of Adam a clay figurine. And then he blew the breath of life into its nostrils, and the figurine became alive. And it said that the figurine was made in the image of God. For God, who is conceived in this particular image as personal, as a living, intelligent spirit, creates in man something like that. But you must note very definitely that this is a creation, as the potter makes a pot out of clay. For the creature that the Lord God has made is not God. The creature is something less than God. Something like
Depths in
God, but not
southeast
God.
England at the head of a 50-mile estuary down
And you
to
will
the
see
North
some
Sea.
very
It has
interesting
been a main
consequences follow from this idea of the world as an artifact. What follows from it is that the whole universe is seen as a marvelous technical accomplishment. And if it is made, there must be an explanation of how it is made. And the whole history of Western thought has in many ways been an attempt to discover how the Creator did it. What were the principles? What were the laws laid down? What, in other words, was the blueprint that underlies this creation? And this image has therefore persisted throughout Western history and continues on into a time when very many people do not believe in Christianity or Judaism or Islam. They are, you might say, agnostics or atheists, but they still carry on something of this idea of the world as an artifact. If you are a Christian or a Jew, you believe that the world is the artifact, the creation of the intelligent spirit called God. But if in this culture you are an atheist or an agnostic, you believe that the world is an automatic machine without a creator, something which made itself. We might say then that our original model of the universe was the ceramic model. And the Bible is full of references to God as the potter, who makes the world out of obedient clay. But when Western thinkers in the 18th century began to drop the idea of a personal God. They kept the idea of the artifact. And so we could say that after the ceramic model of the universe, we got the fully automatic model. And still, you see, underlying our way of thinking about things is the question, how are they put together? And if you want to find out, one of the obvious ways to proceed is to take them to pieces. Everybody knows that if you want to find out how something is made, you unscrew the parts and see what the secret is inside the box. And so Western science in its beginnings took everything apart. It took animals apart, it took flowers apart, it took rocks apart. And then when they got it reduced to its tiniest pieces, they tried to find methods of taking those apart too, so that we could eventually discover what the very smallest small things were, and so know what building blocks the creator, or the fully automatic model, used in order to put it all together, hoping that that would lead us to an understanding of how life works. Man himself in all this was looked upon as a creation, something made. Only, there were some difficulties about this, because if you believe in the world in accordance with the idea of the fully automatic model, you've really got to admit that man too is fully automatic. In other words, he's a machine rather than a person. Man is something, in other words, that says, doffs its hat to you and says, how do you do? I'm a person, I'm alive, I'm sensible, I talk, I have feelings. But you wonder, do you really? Or are you just an automaton? Am I real, or am I just an automaton? The general result of the Western image of man hasn't been quite that. What it's come down to, under the dispensation of the fully automatic model, is this. We are living beings, we're very sensitive, and inside the human skin, by an extraordinary fluke of nature, there has arisen something called reason. And there have also arisen values, such as love. But this was a fluke, because it happened inside a fully automatic universe, which is stupid, because it's merely automatic. You won't, in other words, find anything really intelligent outside human skins. And therefore, if that is so, the only thing that people can do, if they want to maintain reason and love in this universe, is to fight nature and beat the stupid external world into submission to the human will. And so the war against nature is the great project, thus far, of Western technology. Because you see, each one of us, because we have inherited from thousands of years of history a view of man as something made, and almost of a sort of breath breathed into a pot of clay, or an image of clay. A kind of, each one feels himself as a globule of consciousness or mind, living inside a vehicle called my body. And since the world outside that body is stupid, we feel estranged from the world. When we find out how enormous the universe is, that makes us as individuals feel extremely unimportant and rather lonely. Because you see, we consider ourselves, our basic image of ourselves, is of a soul, or an ego, or a mind, all by itself in its little house, looking out at a world that is strange and that is not me. I am therefore a brief interval of consciousness between the darkness and the darkness. And that isn't too happy. I would like to be able to believe that it was more than that. If I could, so many of us say, if I could only still believe that there is an intelligent and eternal God in whose eyes I am important and who has the power to enable me to live forever, that would be very nice. But for many people, that's an extraordinarily difficult thing to believe. Now I want to contrast this image of the world with another, what I call the dramatic image, as distinct from the image of the potter, or the ceramic image. And this will be the presiding image of Hinduism. Their idea is this, that God didn't make the world like a technologist, but he acted it. That is to say, every person, and everything for that matter, every tree, every flower, every animal, every star, every rock, every grain of dust, is a role or part which the Godhead is playing. You must understand, of course, that the Hindu image of God is a little bit different from the Jewish, the Christian, and the Islamic. When I was a boy, little boy, I used to ask my mother interminable questions. And when she got sick of it, she said, "My dear, there are some things in this life that we're just not meant to know." Well, I said, "Will we ever know?" She said, "Yes. If you die and then go to heaven, God will explain it all." And so I used to hope that on wet afternoons in heaven, we would all be able to sit round the throne of grace and say to the Lord, "Why did you do this and why did you do that?" And he would explain. Every child in the West asks his mother, "How was I made?" And nobody knows, but they know that perhaps somebody does, and that will be God, and he'll be able to explain. Likewise, if anybody gets mentally deranged and claims to be God, we always humor such people by asking them technical questions. How did you make the world in 6 days? Or if you're God, why couldn't you change this plate into a rabbit? But that is because, in our popular image of God, God is the supreme technocrat. He knows all the answers. He understands everything in detail and could tell you all about it. But the Hindus don't think of God that way. If you ask the Hindu God, "How did you create the human body?" he would say, "Look, I know how I did it, but it can't be explained in words, because words are too clumsy. In words, I have to talk about things slowly. I have to string them out, because words run in a line. And lines add up to books, and books add up to libraries. And if I explained to you how I made the human organism, it would take all eternity for me to tell you. Unfortunately for me, I don't have to understand things in words in order to make them happen. Nor do you. You don't have to understand in words how you breathe. You just breathe. You don't have to understand in words how to grow your hair, how to shape your bones, how to make your eyes blue or brown. You just do it. And somebody who does understand, to some extent, maybe a physiologist, he can't do it any better than you can. So that, you see, is the Hindu idea of divine omnipotence. And that is why their images of the gods very often have many arms. You'll often see the god Shiva with 10 arms, or the Buddhist Avalokiteshvara with 1,000 arms. And that is because their image of the divine is a sort of centipede. A centipede can move 100 legs without having to think about it. So Shiva can move 10 arms very dexterously without having to think about it. And you know what happened to the centipede when it stopped to think how to move 100 legs. It got all balled up. So in this way, the Hindus do not think of God as being a technician in the sense of having a verbal or mathematical understanding of how the world is created. It's done in a simpler way, just like that. Only if we had to describe this simple way in words, it would be very complicated, but God, in their idea, doesn't need to do so. But the remarkable difference is that the Hindu doesn't see any fundamental division between God and the world. The world is God at play. The world is God acting. Now, how could you possibly arrive at such an idea? Very simply, when he tries to think why there is a world at all, because if you think about it, it is extraordinarily odd that there is anything. It would have been much simpler and required a great deal less energy, for there would have been nothing. But here it is. And why? Well, what would you do if you were God? Or let me put it in a simpler way. Supposing that every night you could dream any dream you wanted to dream, what would you do? Well, first of all, I'm quite sure that most of us would dream all the marvelous things we wanted to happen. We would fulfill all our wishes. And we might go on that way for months. Besides, you could make it extraordinarily rich by wishing to dream 75 years in one night, full of glorious happenings. But after you had done that for a few months, you might begin to get a little tired of it. And you would say, what about an adventure tonight, in which something terribly exciting and rather dangerous is going to happen? But I'll know I'm dreaming, so it won't be too bad. And I'll wake up if it gets too serious. So you do that for a while. You rescue princesses in distress from dragons and all sorts of things. And then when you've done that for some time, you say, now let's go out a bit further. Let's forget it's a dream and have a real thrill. Ooh. But you know you'll wake up. And then you get, after you've done that for a while, you get more and more nerve. until you sort of dare yourself as to how far out you can get. And you end up dreaming the sort of life you're living now. Now, why does one do that? Why would one do that? The reason, the Hindu would say, is that the basic pulse of life, the basic motivation of existence, is what we call the game of hide and seek. Now you see it, now you don't. You see, everything's based on that, because all life is vibration, pulsing. Light is a pulsation of light-darkness. Sound is a pulsation of sound-silence. Everything is going at various speeds. And in order to have, say, it's like the motion of a wave. Now, a wave consists of two pulses, the crest and the trough. You can't have crests without troughs. You can't have troughs without crests. They always go together. You can't have hide without seek. You can't have seek without hide. Just for example, you can't have here without there. Because if you didn't know where there was, you wouldn't know where here was. You can't have is without isn't. Because you don't know what you mean by is unless you also know what you mean by isn't, and vice versa. So in that way, they think that hide and seek is the fundamental game. As if the Lord, God, the Brahman as they call it, said in the beginning, get lost, man. Disappear. And I'll find you again later. And then when you know the disappearance gets very far out, then the contrary rhythm begins, and the dreamer wakes up and finds out, whew, that was a relief. And then after a rest period, in which everything is of course at peace, it starts all over again, because the spirit of adventure springs eternal. Now then, the Hindus had extremely vast ideas of space and time for their period in history, and they have the theory that the hiding part of the game goes on for 4,320,000 years, a period called a kalpa, K-A-L-P-A in Sanskrit. And then the seek part, that is to say, let me put it this way, the dreaming part, is followed by the waking part. The dreaming is the hiding, where the Godhead imagines that it's all of us. Then for another 4,320,000 years, there's a period of awakening. And then at the end of that, again begins the dream. Now the dreaming period is further subdivided into 4 stages. The first stage is the longest, and it's the best. During that stage, the dream is beautiful. The second stage is not quite so long, and it's a little unsettling. There's an element of instability in it, a certain touch of insecurity. In the third stage, which is not, again, so long, the forces of light and the forces of darkness, of good and of evil, are equally balanced, and things are beginning to look rather dangerous. And in the fourth stage, which is the shortest of them all, the negative, dark, or evil side triumphs, and the whole thing blows up in the end. But then that's like the bang in the dream, you know, when you get shot in a dream and you wake up, and it was after all a dream. And so then there's a waking period before the whole thing starts again. And so the Hindus feel that behind the scene, that is to say, in reality, under the surface, you are all the actor. But behind the scenes, in the green room, you might say in the very back of your mind, in the very depths of your soul, you always have a very tiny sneaking suspicion that you might not be the you that you think you are.